turn to Luke chapter 15. I want to talk about the nature of God. I forgot exactly what's the title of this one? Knowing the heart of God. I want to kind of run two stories a little parallel with each other, one from Luke 15 and the other from my own life and my own journey. I think if yesterday when we talked about Psalm 2, do you remember, by the way, do you remember the three things from Psalm 2, the three areas? Awe, rejoice, and kiss. Good. So awe, just the joy of the Lord and intimacy. And we have God saying that these are how I want you to come to me. And yet this is I'm not saying this in a negative way, but is there something in the New Testament where the Lord kind of says, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. And I love the fact that Jesus loves stories. I like stories. I love movies. How many love movies? Okay, what's your favorite movie? Lord of the Rings. Dumb and Dumber, really? I love that. That's awesome. Book of Eli. The Avengers. Yeah, no, that's really good. I liked it. But you got to stay for the very, very end. After all the credits are done. So if you haven't seen the Avengers, stay until all the credits are done, and then there's one scene. It's awesome. It's great. I love movies. Dumb and Dumber. I love Dumb and Dumber. That old lady that ripped him off. All these little things. Dumb and Dumber. It's great. The power of a story is incredible. And Jesus understood that. And he understood the times that the parable was really, you hide things in there. And people knew that would happen. So if you have a parable, a lot of parables, they're right out there. We understand it because we even preached to 100 times about the same parable. But the story itself, so when I say the story of the prodigal son, actually when I say Luke 15 and people go, isn't that where the story of the prodigal son? It's kind of like, yeah, kind of. But that's not the full, he's just one character in a much larger story. And so I know that because God never changes, he wants to do what he did in Psalm 2. He wants to say, this is who I am and this is what I'm about. And this is how I want you to come to me. And Luke 15 is just one of those beautiful chapters where it all kind of happens together. Now, if anybody have a Bible in front of them, Luke 15, starting in verse 4, what's the difference between the words in verses 1, 2, and 3 and in verse 4? Yeah, is it in your Bible, is it red? It goes down to the rest of the chapter, doesn't it? Yeah, and so... except verse 11, someone said, well, it says, then he said. I said, yeah, I know, but it's highlighting the fact that he's saying it. So I appreciate that religious person. So there's a story of sheep, there's a story of a coin, and there's a story of a lost son. And it's three different parables. But if you look at verse 3, it says he spoke this parable to them, then he keeps talking the whole way. So what's really interesting is that, and I noticed things like that. It's like, wait, he spoke a parable, but he kept talking. But it's in the little things, it says the parable of the lost coin. It's man that divided up the three sections. But the word of God says he spoke this parable. So I did some research and said, okay, wait a minute. Is this three different parables that aren't connected, or is this three different stories that are saying one parable? Did you catch the difference? Okay. I believe it's the latter. I believe it's 3 stories, and God is saying something in the whole chapter. And I want to bring that out because it is the nature, it's the heart of God. It's understanding, I think, how he feels and sees much more than we even realize. And I just believe that Jesus was, in a lot of ways, he was supernatural. In a lot of ways, he was just normal. He was a human being. So in my mind, I start out chapter 15 by the night before. Jesus is sitting around the campfire. The disciples are kind of, he's gotten a little quiet. And then he's got a stick and he's playing with a fire and he's just smiling. And they've been around him long enough to know that when Jesus, who's the Son of God, smiles, hey, what are you going to produce s'mores out of the fire? This would be fun. You could do that miracle here. Make some wine. I'll get some water. You make some wine. Heard you did that one before. And so they're kind of like, what he's smiling about. So Jesus, you're smiling. What's the smile about? Tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Tomorrow is Luke 15. They look over at Luke. I don't know. But tomorrow is Luke 15. I'm just writing. I don't know. I just write. And so he is, and this is why I say that, because, well, really nobody else can say this. Have you ever said, I've always wanted to? Right? Well, you haven't always wanted to. Like my grandson's going to be 5 next month. He was with us for 23 days in April and the beginning of May. Great, had a great time. Had two my grandkids with him. And he said this one time, I always wanted to. He's 4. You've always wanted to. And he went, yeah, I always wanted to play with that. Really? And how long is your always wanted to? Because I remember the day you were born, and then the day you had any kind of a conscious thought. So I can guarantee that's not always. But if Jesus was going to say, I've always wanted to reveal what my Father's really like, he can get away with it. Because he's always wanted to. He's been walking around now for years looking at religious zealots say that they're representing God. And he's been walking around for years watching people who come from a long line of lovers of God become demonized and sin-directed human beings. And yet they have this title. Maybe they're Jewish or whatever it is. We've got Matthew who's just scrounging and pulling money out of people's pockets so that he can lace his own pockets with other people's money. And so we've got all this group of people, and he's walking around now for years watching his Father be misrepresented. That's gotta, the humanity in him has got to feel that. It's one thing if you're misrepresented, you can go, they just don't know me. But it's like, whoa, that's my dad. And I've been with him a long time. And you use his name in vain, and you say horrible things about him, and you say that God wants to do this to you. It's like, my Father's not like that. And so he is looking forward to Luke 15 because he wants to unveil what his Father's like. And the way he does it says in verse 1, it says, all the tax collectors and sinners drew near to hear him. Well, tax collectors and sinners, isn't it funny? Hi, are you here for the Jesus conference? Yes, I am. And you are what? I'm a tax collector. You over there. Okay, and I'm a sinner. Isn't it funny that they describe him as a sinner? What's really funny is that the word is not sinner. It's used throughout the New Testament, but the Greek word means harlot. And depending on how the translators wanted to do it, they use the same word. In one place they call it sinner, in another place they call it harlot, and the next one they call it sinner. But it's the same exact Greek word. But the fact of the matter is, and you are, I'm a harlot. Well, you go over with the tax collectors. No offense, I'm putting you all over here. And verse 2 is, and then all the scribes and Pharisees, they complain, this man receives sinners and eats with them. So we've got tax collectors and sinners, and then we've got scribes and Pharisees. Now, I know I'm now putting over here and doing that with that arm. But the fact of the matter is, they would not be in the same area, right? I mean, if they were in the crowd, can you imagine, tax collector cozying up to one of the Pharisees? Hey, how you doing? Turn to greet your neighbor. It's the beginning of the Jesus conference. Greet your neighbor. You can just see the Pharisee going, there's, what's her name? The prostitute from the city. And, hi, how are you? My name is, I know who you are. Yeah, they wouldn't be around each other. So that's why I'm separating them. And so Jesus, any good speaker knows who he's talking to. Jesus is looking out. Number one, he's the Son of God. So he created them. So he knows them. But he's looking out going, okay, I know, here's my crowd. Now, the defining of these two groups was not for Jesus, because he already knew them. The defining of the two groups is for everyone who reads this chapter. So you know the two defined groups that are in front of Jesus. Sinners who, by the way, do you think the sinners and the prostitutes and the tax, do you think they need God? Okay. Do you think the scribes and Pharisees need him? Okay. Do you think the sinners and tax collectors, do you think the prostitutes, do you think they know that they need God? Do you think these guys know that they need God? That's the difference. When you know you need God, you're already ahead in the game. And he's looking at these two groups, and he tells specific stories. This is the first one. It says, what man having 100 sheep, if he loses one, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? You know the story. Very, very famous story. and I could just see the Pharisees. They're going, oh, yes, the lost sheep. And they look over at the tax collectors and sinners. This story is about them. Yep, they were there. We were the shepherds. And they just rebellious. And the tax collectors and sinners are going, yep, that's about us. That's me. I can just see it. What makes, they're there all together. And the one sheep goes, I'm breaking out of here. He says, what? He says, I'm breaking out of here. He says, what do you mean? We have such a good shepherd. Oh, him? Pastor Shepherd? Oh, yeah. Control freak. Oh, it's all leadership. Control freak. That's all they do. They're in it to control you. He don't want to control us. He takes us down to this beautiful water at the end of a stream, and he takes us up to the side of the hill. The grass is beautiful. Do you notice he never takes us around to the other side? I hear that's where the best water is, and I hear that's where the best grass is. But he never takes us over there, does he? Why? Controls us. He wants to. That's what leadership does. I'm breaking out. So at nighttime, that little sheep goes over to the fence, sticks its little sheep butt against the fence. Dude, what are you doing? I'm breaking out. I told you I'm breaking out. Don't do it, man. There's wolves. Oh, there's no wolf. Have you ever seen a wolf? Come on. Well, the shepherd said there's wolves out there. There's no wolves out there. Wolves are made-up monsters that it's a spirit of fear that he puts upon us so that we won't go to the other side where the best water and the best grass is. Dude, don't do Oh, yeah. His little sheep hoof. High three. Sorry. Just seemed right at the moment. So he gets out and the other sheep are going, don't go away. Don't, come back. No. And he's gone. The shepherd comes down and goes, hey, so what happened? Wait. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Who's gone? Billy. The goat. Yeah. So he fixes the fence, gets somebody to watch the sheep, and then goes after the one which is lost. And the story is going, and they're listening to it, and the scribes are listening to it, and the sinners are listening to it, and everything's going on. And he goes, now, what's happening here? And they're just thinking, what's going to happen next in the story? And Jesus goes, well, and when he found the sheep, and I can just see this Pharisee. Now, I'm pretending this is not in Scripture. I just like to add silly. And if one Pharisee goes, can I finish the story? I think I know how the story goes. Well, sure, go ahead. Well, the sheep is out there, and the shepherd finds the sheep and catches up to him. And he takes the sheep and holds him down and beats him with a stick until he's blood red all over. And then he breaks its leg in the back so it'll never run away again, drags the sheep back all the way over and throws it in front of all the other sheep and says, that's going to happen to you if you run away. Little Pharisee is like, so, am I right? Just, no, not really. Actually, this is what happened. The shepherd got there just in time because the sheep had gotten caught in the brambles, because the other side of the mountain was filled with brambles and rocks that fell down into cliffs, and it's a very dangerous place. And he got caught in brambles, and there were some wolves that were starting to come around, and the sheep really learned that wolves are real. But the shepherd got there in time and beat the wolves off with a staff and pulled out the sheep very gently, just held on to him and held him and said, oh, so glad you're safe. And then picked him up and put him around himself and took his little legs and pushed him against his chest so the sheep could feel the heartbeat of the shepherd. And then brought the sheep back, laid him down and said, he's found. Let's have a party. That's really what it says. He says, I said, rejoice with me, for I found my sheep which was lost. He goes, and it says the same thing in all the others. Rejoice with me. Let's party. And the scribes and Pharisees are like, you didn't beat it? You should beat sheep. Disobedient sheep are to be beaten. That's why God gave them to us. And the tax collectors and sinners are going, party? We know what party is. Cool. And suddenly it's just this whole concept that, wait a minute. Forgiveness for not just being, forgiveness for absolute outright rebellion is available, and he will come to you. In the midst of your most grievous event, if you're open, he will come to you. It's like, oh my goodness. And so now there's hope. He tells the second story. He says, a woman has 10 silver coins. She loses one coin, doesn't light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully till she finds it. Now, unlike the sheep, the coin, which I have an American quarter, nothing larger. If anybody had a loony or a toonie or a goonie or whatever they are here. But here's the coin doesn't have little legs. I'm getting out of here. You know, he can't run like I'm making. He's just like water. He just falls and goes down to the gravity, wherever gravity takes him. So there's this coin, but it says a woman has 10 silver coins, and actually it's the word is drachma, and most often when they had 10 drachma, they were arranged in a necklace. So ladies, let me ask you this question, because most men don't wear necklaces, some do, but more decorative, larger necklaces, usually a woman is going to wear them. And if you had a necklace that had 10 silver coins around it like this, okay, and one of them, this one right here or right here, it's missing, are you going to wear that necklace? But it's got 9 expensive coins. Would you wear it? So we have this really expensive necklace, but it's not worthless, but it's worth less. And so in your mind, it's worth less. So you take the necklace and you probably put it in a drawer upstairs, you push it closed and it collects dust, even though it is very, very expensive. And she goes, well, I got to find this coin somewhere. And she goes through 3 things to find this coin. Number 1, she lights a lamp, she sweeps the house, and then she searches carefully. And he gets done with the story and says, she finds it and we rejoice. And the scribes and Pharisees are going, oh, well, what's that story about? And the tax collectors and sinners are going, that can't be about us. But it has coins, but it doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. And most Christians nowadays go, I like the sheep story, and the prodigal son's cool. What in the world is this coin story about? Well, I've got tax collectors and sinners. They're in the house of God. They're part of that. But for that sheep that first went, where did the sheep get lost? Did the sheep get lost in the shepherd's fold, or did the sheep leave the house and got lost? Okay? Tell me, which one? Left the house and got lost. The coin is in the house. Did the coin get little legs and leave the house and get lost? Okay, so one is lost outside the house. One is lost in the house. Sheep outside, coin in. Tax collectors and sinners are not part of the house of God, so to speak. And they're lost outside of temple worship, outside of what is known as the house of God. Scribes and Pharisees, they are lost. But are they out there in the highways and the byways? Where are they lost? In the house. Did you catch it? So we've got sheep lost out there, tax collectors and sinners lost out there. We've got Pharisees lost here. We've got a coin lost here. And the only way that coin, the only way the Pharisees and scribes get saved and can party is, number one, you have to light a lamp. What is light a lamp? It's light, is revelation. They have to have revelation. And then it says she sweeps the house. You got to get rid of all the other forms of false notions about God. And then you search for what is left, and you'll find it. Now, this is huge because, let me say this. Most of us major on the prodigal son. And most of us talk about the sheep that's lost. And then once you've been saved, you say the story doesn't apply to me anymore. Well, it does in normal life. But what really applies to us is story number 2. The believer becomes, all you have to do is watch people watch other people. Or you just become a pastor and have people complain about other people. And what happens is something happens when we gather into the household of God and we move into, there's this bizarre thing where we feel that we can advance as long as somebody else is going backwards. We can move forward as long as we see other people going backwards. And we don't say that out loud. We weep with those who weep. Oh, brother, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for a horrible situation. And that's what we're like. We're like, I feel bad, Jimmy. It's just, I heard about such and such. I'm really, really sorry, man. And what that does, we weep with those who weep because we look strong. But if something great happens to Jimmy that I wanted to have happen to me, we don't rejoice with those that we have a harder time doing that. Because weeping and being there for somebody else, I look strong. But Jimmy, great things are going on with him. I want them to go on with me. He just had an aunt who he never even knew about. She died and left him $5 million. No, he didn't even know that either. And so he comes and tells Chris, this is what happened. This Aaron, I didn't even know that she existed. She was like my mom's cousin's cousin, but I guess whatever reason, when I was born, I was the only one, and then she left all her money to me. Isn't that great? $5 million. Wow, that's really great, Jimmy. God bless you. I'm very, very excited. And I'm sure you can see it in my face. God bless you. God bless you. Blessed. And it's just bizarre. And so it's so easy to be found by God and yet find yourself, your soul becomes lost in the house because of competition, because of insecurity. I'm going back and forth online with somebody about insecurities. This wonderful man, and there's just some insecurities he's dealing with after all these years. Kind of like, brother, you don't even see how other people see you. And so we got one lost inside the house and one lost outside the house. And he comes and says, now a certain man has 2 sons. What were those 2 sons? An older brother and a younger brother. The father gave the inheritance to both of them. To them he divided his inheritance. People think he gave the inheritance to the younger son. No. He gave the inheritance to both of them. Can I tell you what the inheritance for the older brother would be? Twice what the younger brother would get. So you would take an amount, and if you were dividing the amount, if you had 2 sons, you'd divide it in 2/3 and 1/3. The younger brother would get 1/3, the older brother would get twice as much. If there were 5 kids, you divide it into 6 sections. You give this one, the larger one, that's twice what everybody else gets. That's just how it was, the older brother. So the older brother gets twice as much. Guess what else he got? It's not spoken, but the older brother, if his inheritance, you know what it would include? Everything the father owned. That's the inheritance. He gets the whole farm, the whole everything. It's all his, all the servants. And then the younger brother gets his inheritance, and we know what he did. One gets lost by going out, and when the other one comes back and they rejoice, the older brother's heart is exposed, the fact that he had been lost all the time in the father's house. And he's complaining about his brother. That's why I'm saying it's just so easy. He says, what are you partying for? Well, he lost all your money. That son of yours, he's not even his brother anymore. That son of yours wasted everything. And he says, oh, you've been with me all this time? All that I have is yours. Remember that? I gave it to you. But you're lost. Your soul is lost. And yet, you come and you live in my house. And here we are as believers. Here's the thing. If we don't know who our Father is and how our Father sees us, we then direct our lives according to a perception of what he's like. You're directed by the Father, whether it's reality or misperception. And your misperception will lead you into doing things and saying things and being jealous and being petty. And it won't bring you peace because your peace is found by getting a piece of what's out there. And yet when you know who your Father is and what your Father's given you, you can rest. I don't have to perform. I'm done performing for God. I'm done doing things because, I feel like I have to. And yes, I'm a man under authority, and I understand that. I want to carry a rebellious heart in any way, but at the same time, I know how he sees me. And when I've done right, and what I get back is attitude, I can hear the truth that's behind it, and I can screen the attitude because what I stand rooted in is not how they feel, but how someone sees me. So, comes down to, for me, the journey is this guy, right there. Picture taken 1944, World War II. That young man right there with the blazing blue eyes and cleft chin. His name was David J. Dupre. He was my dad. And he was a lieutenant in the Air Force, and he was on the B-17s that did runs into occupied France and Germany during World War II. Let me put it this way. My dad was one of 4 brothers. There was an older sister, much older sister, and then 4 boys that were born almost a year apart between all 4 of them. And they had a saying between them, and it translates here in America and in Canada. This saying translates. It doesn't translate in other countries, so I can say it here, is that when one of us has $1, each of us have a quarter. Now, we don't do this nowadays. It's not this. It's a very different world. We pull to get what we can as much as what we can. These guys were very different. When this one graduated from high school, these 3 worked part-time jobs and put him through college. And then they put him through college, and they put him through college, and they put him through college. And all 4 graduated with degrees because all of them, with their own scholarships and with part-time jobs that they all worked, they all helped each other go through college. That's just an amazing thing, the fact that these men would do that. And then the war breaks out, and of course, it was just one of those things that, some wars, who's the bad guy? Are you sure that's the bad? There was no doubt. There was a guy named Adolf Hitler. There was a bad man. And people signed up like they'd never signed up before. And it was the good guys against the bad guys. And my dad was a good guy, and actually his nickname was Nice Guy Dave. And they called him that, Nice Guy. Hey, nice guy. And after a while, it becomes a nice guy. It was just kind of shortened, but they called him Nice Guy Dave. And I wasn't around when he was a teenager, and when he was younger, but he would open the door for ladies and anybody, dogs, he was just a nice guy. And so, hence the name. And he goes into the war as that kind of man. He was the man, what he says he will do. Everyone could count on Dave Dupre. His word was bond. He was a very kind man. And he goes into the war, and he's in B-17. Now, I don't know. Anybody here not flown in a plane? Okay, everyone's flown in a plane. Okay. We fly in luxurious planes. Oh, not me, I'm back in coach. All you have to do sometimes is step into an old B-17 or a B-22 or a B-29 and they're all the same inside. They're a tin can. The B-17, I could take a 22, just a very low caliber gun, and shoot the side of the B-17. It would go through the side and out the other side. It was a tin can, and you put guys up here, and all everything that the rods and wires on the plane were exposed, so the guys were constantly stepping over them, because to cover them would add weight to the plane, and so it's just the ugliest. I mean, on the outside, ooh, B-17. But if you've ever stepped inside a B-17, it's just this ugly little plane, and these poor guys, on the side, the gunners on the side, and the tail gunner on the back, and the turret gunner underneath. I mean, that's just not an enviable thing to do. It looks like it'd be cool. Look at that turret gunner. He can turn around. It's like Star Wars. No, you're down in a little pit. You can't even get out by yourself. You need someone to help you out. And so my dad is in this thing, and this is what I don't understand. My dad joins the Air Force. You know what his number one fear was? Heights. Wow, okay. It's like being afraid of water and wanting to be a Navy SEAL. So I don't know. He was afraid of heights, so he joins the Air Force. Could never figure that one out. He's on his missions. They go back and forth. They go from England, southeastern corner of England, across the English Channel into occupied France. And that's what they were doing was in June of 1944, the Allies land on the western corner of France on the beaches there, and they begin to make their way across. And what my dad's company did, and he was in a thing called Battle of the Bulge and a number of different battles, was they would go out and they would bomb areas, carpet bombing. And carpet bombing was just planes were lined up. If you can picture a bowling alley and all the pins, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they would go like that in a formation, kind of this triangle formation, and then they would all drop their bombs at once, and it would carpet an area, a huge area. Unlike today, we have smart bombs. You pin the bomb out, and then you mark it somewhere with a laser, and the bomb literally goes to the exact house and the spot on the house where the laser was. Well, they didn't have that back then. So what they had to do was get a bunch of planes, bunch them together, and then all at once, boom, 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 and they just drop a whole bunch of bombs, each plane, all at the same time, and they all drop bombs together, and it just literally carpets this whole area. So it was just devastating. So they would carpet the area in front of where the men were coming across France to soften things up for them in their journey across France. On his 13th mission, they get a call to fuel up, to make sure that they're really kind of topped off, because this is their first run into Berlin. They're going to cross over into Germany and begin running into Berlin. So it's my father's 13th mission. And they take off, and they just get across the German border, and the pilot, I guess, communicates to them that they're now in Germany. My dad said almost instantly everything around him exploded. And he looks out and he sees planes just, and he sees men falling and just dropping out of planes. And he hears these light screams that the explosions couldn't cover up fully. And my dad is just petrified. He's 20 years old. He's 20 years old, and all of this is going on. And suddenly his plane is hit, and it takes out, the flak just comes through and it goes through the plane, and then one of the engines is hit, and it sparks. He says one engine died, and the second engine died, and I'm saying a second engine because I think there's four. And Richard, is that true? Is there four? Okay. He's a pilot, so thank you. And so he flew B-17s in World War II, by the way. Okay. Well, he listened to the B-52s in 1980. Okay. Anyway, so the plane's hit, and the pilot says to my father was a radar man. He was a bombardier in the beginning. He got trained in radar, this new thing called radar, that you could go even when the clouds were there. So he gets trained in radar, becomes the radar man, and now he's in charge of the back half of the plane. So he goes back to his best friend, who is the turret gunner. It's the gunner underneath. And he has to go there first because he's the guy that needs to be helped out. So my dad reaches in and hears this swirling sound that's really loud as he gets close. And he realizes that the plexiglass or whatever it was, there's a hole in it, and he's hearing the air rushing through. And he sees his friend, and he reaches in and grabs his hand. He starts to pull him, and the guy's head comes off. He's decapitated. And my father vomits. And the tail gunner was dead. Turret gunner is now dead. He comes back, and there's two gunners on the side. One jumps out the window and parachutes out. The guy on the left was unconscious. My dad picks him up, takes a hold of his ripcord, and pushes him out the window and holds on to the ripcord, and the guy's chute opens up, and he lived. I met him years later, and it was like, your dad saved my life. I said, yeah, I heard the story. That's amazing. And every time he'd say that, he'd come up to me and goes, your daddy saved my life. And then I'm 12. Your daddy saved my life. And then I'm 18, and he's this little guy, and he goes to reach up, and I just went, yeah, don't touch me. You know, it's fine. I get it. My daddy saved your life. But years later, after I got saved, I went, he still is holding on to appreciation for being saved. It's still as fresh as the day he was saved. And I just said, Lord, please let me be like him. Let me stay fresh in my gratitude for what you did for me. He never took that for granted. He was like a little kid every time he could tell somebody what my dad did. And I was like, oh, that's what I want. I don't ever want to take it, forsake and forget. And so my dad now jumps out of the plane. He and the pilot do thumbs up. My dad jumps out of the plane. Actually, a second before he jumped out of the plane, he said he heard something up front. He thought the pilot was saying something. He heard and turned and stopped moving forward. The second he did that, a piece of shrapnel came, and he had on this little oxygen mask that was still there. He had just left it on, and it took the mask and stuck it to the side of the plane. And my dad looked at this piece of flak. He had a little scar there. It was there his whole life, and he looked and goes, that would have been my brain. If my dad had not stopped that 1 second, he would have been dead. Would have gone through his head. And so he was like, oh, thank you, God. But then he was like, I got to jump out of the plane. Because now he's looking out, and the plane is doing this, and the engines are sparking, and he's hearing explosions, and he jumps out, 3 seconds later, his plane explodes. The force of the explosion knocked him back. I mean, only 3 seconds. He's fallen. It's not that far. It didn't take that long. And it just pushed him down and back. He said it was like someone punched him, but didn't punch him in one spot. It was like a monstrous fist just punched him, and it just sent him reeling. And then a second later, now he's just free falling. And he said, thank God I was awake. But now I'm falling to the earth. And they didn't practice jump. You would think they do that. The paratroopers practiced, but they didn't have the time and the money to have regular Air Force people practice jumping out of a plane. Because to do that, you have to take them up, then you have to waste fuel because they're just practicing. They just figured most of you will probably die. Those of you that do live, you'll figure it out. We've taught you you pull the ripcord. And he knew that he pulled the ripcord at 1,500 feet because the pilot, every time the pilot would go up, he'd say 1,500, everyone would look out and they'd go, and when the pilot was going to land, he'd yell 1,500 and everyone would look out. And so you go up and down enough, you see 1,500, you know what it looks like. So he's falling going, okay, wait for 1,500, wait for 1,500. And he's scared out of his life. He says, I know I screamed like a little girl. And he's falling, and suddenly he gets to what he knows is about 1,500 feet. And he says, I learned a very valuable lesson that day. Never, under any circumstances, are you to put your parachute on upside down. Oh. Now, parachutes then were different. They had 4 holes. You put hands through, you put feet through, and then you strapped it. In the midst of all the rush that's going on, there's 2 holes down here and 2 holes up here. He's coming back from the back of the plane. He gets in there, puts 2 holes in, thinks doesn't fit quite right, but it's okay. And straps it, but straps it the other way. It's like, okay, I thought it went this way. He said, I didn't even think about it. I knew I had it on, and it was behind me, and he pulls the ripcord. The second he pulled the ripcord, his head went, and he's now going like this towards the earth at 1,500 feet with his feet up in the air, and it pulled him so fast that the muscle in his back separated from his back. Now, I don't know about you. If you ever pulled a muscle in your arm and you had to get something on a shelf, and you went, and you do everything you can to get by the muscle, there you go. And then you got to, there we go. Well, here he is now. He's got to right himself. And so he says, I took my hands, and I just went up the cords. And so my head was above. But if I let go with my hand, my feet go back down under me. And I'm looking down, and I'm holding on with dear life. And the thing is, the parachutes then are different than the parachutes now. Now when you see guys and they're parachuting, they land and they just go, right? Back then, a lot of the injuries the guys got were because they broke their ankles and their legs, parachuting, because you land at 30 miles an hour. So if you don't know how to land well because you haven't practiced well, a lot of guys were killed because when they landed, they broke a leg and then the enemy came and got them. So my dad is coming down, he's realizing he's landing in trees, so he's got one good hand, he lifts it up and pulls on this cord, and it pulls him away from the trees. He goes, a field. So he goes towards the field, and I grew up on a farm, and Dad had farm experience, and as we're going there, he looks over at the field, and it's January 1945. The field is corn that had been cut from the year before. Thousands of pieces of corn stuck like swords in the air. You don't land in a field of cut corn. You'll be dead. And so he pulls as hard as he can and sees a spot over in the corner where there's no corn. He pulls over to it, pulls on, gets over there, and at the last second, he can't do anything about it. He can't change his mind because this is where he's going to land, where there's no corn. The reason there's no corn is because corn doesn't grow on a boulder. And at the last second, all he does is turn away and he puts his right leg out to save himself. He hits the boulder with his right leg, and an accordion breaks in 9 places. And so now my dad is stuck in the ground with his right leg broken in 9 places and the muscle pull from his back. And he's out there in the middle of a German field. So he said, I pulled the parachute in, and then I went 100 yards, and it took me forever to get underneath these bushes, found some bushes, pulled the parachute in, stuck it over me as protection, put my gun in my hand, And then he said, I passed out. And this little girl comes over and goes, hours later, parlez-vous français? He goes, no. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? No. Well, then, do you speak English? He goes, yes. Okay. And then she goes away. It was a fog, and the French underground came. It was so close to the boat. The French underground came and took him back to a farmhouse. And when he woke up, gave him the dreadful news. They had tried to set his leg as best they could. They said that he woke up different times just screaming as they tried to set it. They didn't have a cast material to do it with. It was with boards and cords. And he said, Lieutenant, it is good that you're a lieutenant. The good news is that you've been saved and you're with the French underground. You can stay with us. There's two options if you stay with us. Number one, your leg will get gangrene most any time. You've been out for a while, you will get gangrene, and so we either need to cut your leg off now, or the other option is you can keep your leg and die, or we can give you to the Germans and hope that because you're an officer, they'll give you medicine. He said, give me to the Germans. So they drove him in and said, we found an American, and he's your prisoner now. And because he was a lieutenant, they gave him medication. It saved his right leg. He did not get gangrene. But as the doctor who treated him said, sir, I'm very sorry. He says, what are you very sorry for? You're saving my leg. He said, sir, I'm saving your leg. I'm getting you ready so you can go to a stalag. He said, well, my job is to get you healthy enough to go to jail, to go to prison. And so that's what he did. He spent a week or so in the hospital, had the medications, and then they sent him to a little hole where a very nasty German guard abused him for the rest of the war. And my dad came out of the war. You know the story of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Well, Dr. Jekyll went in, the brilliant, he had it all together. Mr. Hyde, he came out with two very different personalities. And you mentioned the Avengers, and you talk about that. And there's Dr. Banner. He doesn't call the guy the Hulk. He calls him the other guy. Well, the other guy, if you get me mad, then the other guy shows up. Well, people didn't know that there was another guy. But I did. I was the third of three kids. The oldest one was my sister, who got some of that other guy abuse. The second one was my brother, who was born with a blood disease and spent the first 2 years in and out of the hospital. My dad just looked at him as weak. He was just weak. Then I came out. I was a healthy boy. And for the first 8 years of my life, father meant the one that slaps you, the one that kicks you, the one that picks you and throws you against the wall, the one that takes a stick, the one that takes a belt, the one that uses the back of his hand, the one that walks by you when you're watching TV and smacks the back of your head to the point where you fall just because he's mad about something. It's all pent up. Now, back then, no one talked about post-traumatic stress syndrome. Okay? That only happened after the Vietnam War. And during the Vietnam War and afterwards, post-traumatic stress was never talked about. Actually, the term they used would be shell shock. You were shell-shocked. It just meant that you might have bad dreams or maybe you'd have adverse reactions, but they didn't diagnose it well. And so, I just remember walking along as a little kid. I'm walking there, and we're in Montreal, and he sees a worker in the hotel, and he goes, "Good day." And I was right behind my dad, and I went, "Good day," because I wanted to do the right thing. I'm in a foreign city. I'm an American. I'm in Canada, but now I'm in Montreal, and they speak French. And so I thought, well, I'll try it too. And I said, "Good day." And we get out on the street, and there's 500 people. I mean, it's downtown Montreal. And my father stops and turns to me and goes, "What was that?" And now the whole crowd just stops. And I said, "What?" And he just walks up to me and he smacks me, and I just go rolling backwards. He goes, "Don't you ever disrespect me like that." Now my brother's with me. He picks me up, and I go, "What'd I do?" And he goes, "I think when you said good day, Dad thought you were mocking him." I said, "I wasn't mocking him. I was trying to be him." He said, "Well, he thought you were mocking him." And that's what would happen. Suddenly the other guy would be there. And then a minute later, we're on our way to the World's Fair in Montreal. And I'm supposed to spend the day, with this guy happy? And it was just a bizarre way to live, because you never knew when the other guy was going to show up. So finally, at 8 years old, my mom was coming in. We lived with my grandmother because my dad couldn't hold a job. My dad could hold a job. He couldn't manage things. He was a teacher's teacher. He got teacher of the year 7 years in a row. And then they decided to not do that anymore. No, he got teacher of the year 5 years in a row, and they said, we can't do that. So every 7 years, you can have teacher of the year. So every 7 years, my father was teacher of the year. He was paid during the summer by the state of New York to teach teachers how to teach. At the end of his career, he was paid to teach teachers how to teach teachers. He was that good. What would happen, though, is he would step into school, and everything was already there for him. All of his books, his classroom, the desks, the board behind him, and he didn't have to worry about the students because the population was growing and there were more kids coming all the time. So everything was there for him. All he had to do was tell stories and teach, which he was great. But when he stepped home, he was in charge. He had to pay the bills. He had to do the discipline. And all of that, I did not understand as a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old. I didn't understand that person couldn't handle paying a water bill because he'd been blown out of a plane. It didn't make sense to me. And so what I did was, I hate that man. That man hurts me. He would come in, and depending on how the car door would slam, I knew whether I was in trouble. Not that I had done anything. I just knew what it was going to be like. I just remember one time in my grandmother's house, because we lived, he didn't pay the bills right, so we lived in 9 places by the time I turned 8. We just kept moving. We moved out of every circumstance we moved was a negative move away from something bad. So at 8 years old, my mother comes in, sees something going on, and I'm flying across the room. So that's it, boom, leaves. And so I am now away from my father. She took all 3 kids, went back to our small hometown, back at just 4,000 people. And we grew up there with my dad an hour and a half away. And now suddenly, I came home. Remember the first day coming home? Something was cooking. My mother was there. She gets up and comes over, and she hugs me, and she goes, "Baby, how was your day?" Well, I'm in heaven. This is wonderful. And that was what it was like, day after day, month after month, year after year. Every day I would come home, there's my mom. "Hey, how's my baby?" She called me her baby forever, because I'm her baby. And we grew. I grew. I'm no longer a little kid. I'm now, as a high school kid, I'm 6'1". I was kind of sculpted at the time. I said I was doing well athletically. My father would come to my track meets. I got all mad at that because I thought he was coming because I was, quote unquote, well known. So he would come and he would be Chris Dupre's dad. And I didn't realize my dad was trying to reach out to me. He was going through counseling. There was a VA, Veterans Administrative Counselor, that had gone through the war that was now counseling my dad. It turned out this guy was a believer, counseling my dad how to get his heart right and how to make amends towards his sons and how to reconnect with his sons. So he says, go to his track meets. He goes, "I can't go to his soccer games, but I can make his track meets." So he came to every track meet he could come to. And I'm getting mad seeing him, and the reality is he's trying to reach out to me, but my own pride and arrogance and bitterness kept him away. And suddenly, a few years later, I'm saved. I'm 19 years old, and the Lord says, "So what are you going to do about your dad?" Can't kill him. I could. And you would forgive me. That is an option. I remember kind of hearing the Lord laugh like that. Thinking, well, no, it's probably not right. So, okay, Lord, I hear you. I forgive him in Jesus' name. I forgive my dad. And so that's what I said. And someone would bring up my dad, and I go, "Oh, my father." And he'd go, "So how you doing with that? How's that going?" And I would have to go to family functions, and we'd see each other, and this is the extent of our relationship. I did. Hi, Chris. That was pretty much the extent of our relationship. Birthday's coming up. Oh my gosh, I got my father a birthday card. How do you find one? Dear Dad, thank you for everything. No, that's not. Dear Dad, in spite of all the abuse and I didn't kill you. Love, Chris. You know. So it was just, life was just hard because there were a lot of things we had to do as families together, and it's just, you know, we were Irish. Even though my name's Dupre, my dad is almost all Irish. My mother's Mary Catherine Murphy. So you put that together. Irish people get together all the time, tell stories and drink. That's what my family did. And so we got together all the time. It's like, and so I'm seeing my dad all the time. And it's like, it's just really hard. And after a time period, the Lord, I come home at lunchtime. And this is when I'm going to have to make sure I literally have 7 minutes. This is going to be amazing. If I do this in 7 minutes. Okay. I come home from lunchtime, and the Lord, I'm standing there with a bologna sandwich, listening to worship music, standing in my living room. And suddenly I feel a breeze of thinking, why would someone have the window open? It's the winter. And I open my eyes, and I'm on a hillside. Now, I need you to understand, whether you don't know me that much, but you know me enough, I think, I'm not really a bizarre guy. All right? I don't, oh, there's an angel. I have friends that do that. Did you feel the angel behind you in worship? No. Oh, it was blowing. I don't tell them I have a fan blowing on me. And so they see something, and suddenly they see an angel. Now, I'm not denying that they're not seeing angels. I'm just saying that I don't do that. And suddenly I'm there, I'm going, whoa. So I reach down to the grass and I eat it because I want to see if I'm, and I spit it out because it's grass. And I take my hand and I go over like this and pinch myself. And it really hurt. I'm standing there going, I'm in the same clothes. What is going on? Suddenly all these people are coming. They won't hear us anymore. We need to come see the Lord. So I go up to this little ridge and we stand there, and Jesus comes down in the midst of all of us and begins to look at everybody. And I'm thinking, oh no, he's gonna go, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love Chris. Oh, let me tell all of you what he's done since he's been saved. And I was sure that was going to happen. And I'm going, no. And as he's getting closer, I see the side of his face. And you ever wonder what someone's thinking about you? All you have to do is check their eyes. And I'm going, oh no. His face is like this, and he's scowling. And I'm going, there's nothing worse than Jesus mad. You know, I can't think of anything. And so it's coming around, and I'm looking at his face, and I go, oh, he's going to get me, and he's mad. He's going to stop and embarrass me. And suddenly I realize he's not mad. It's the biggest smile I've ever seen. It's this huge smile. And his eyes are bulging with life and love. And he just stops and looks at me. And nobody ever looked at me like that. And I'm just looking at him. Going, and he's looking at me. And suddenly I heard from him, this is my wild love for you. And I went, wild? Why wild? And I'm thinking this, going back, and I hear this answer, because no one tames or controls how much I love you. I go, oh. And he goes on, and we're lifted up into the air, and we get up there, and he comes and sits next to me. And I'm trying to look at him, and I can't look in his eyes because of the shame I have. For even as a believer, how I've lived and things I'd done and things I'd said and backbiting, whatever it had gone on, I just felt horrible. And he literally takes my face and holds it so that I have to look at him. And I'm looking at him and my eyes are down. So he takes his hand and puts it under my chin and lifts my chin so that now I have to look at him. And I'm looking at him and I'm seeing these big brown eyes and this big ethnic nose, you know, and he just has this wild love. And I said, Lord, I'm so sorry. He just looks at me and goes, shh, 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 shh. He goes, I love you. I'm going, yeah. He goes, I love you. And kind of like Peter, I was like, okay. He goes, you need to know this for what you're going to do with your life. I love you. And he takes my head, puts my head on his chest, and starts to rock me. He's just rocking me. And I'm just weeping and weeping and weeping. And I can tell he's now smiling even bigger. He's loving what's going on. And he's right. No one had ever held me like that. You know, I'm now in my 20s being held by a man, just being held and rocked and weeping. I can hear his heartbeat, kind of like the shepherd. I can hear his heartbeat. And then suddenly, this ball of fire shoots from his chest, hits me in the chest. I fall backwards, and I'm in my apartment. And over there is the bologna sandwich on the floor that I dropped. I'm going, And I walked into my bedroom and fell on my bed and wept and wept and wept and wept. And I get done crying and I look at the pillow and it's like, ew. So I pick the pillow up, and as I pick the pillow up, water's dripping out of the pillow. I'd cried through my pillow. I look at my bed. I put my hand on my mattress and I push my hand down, and water spurts out of the mattress. I'd wept through my pillow into my mattress. 21 years of whatever pain, he delivered me by his just beautiful, gentle love. I mean, I believe in deliverance. I believe it comes in a lot of different ways. I'm going to tell you something. I was a changed man. The Lord said, after that, he said, I want you to forgive your father. I said, I did forgive him. No. Face to face with words. I need your permission to do this. We have 2 minutes. Can I take 5 extra minutes? Okay, thank you. I said, Lord, I don't know about out loud to my dad. He goes, I want you to forgive him. Okay. So did you ever write down in your mind, someone said something to you and they said whatever and you didn't like it and you didn't have anything to say back to them. So at home that night you're lying in bed, you go, I could have said. Did you ever have that revelation on your bed? It's the I could have said when I was in bed. It is. You're lying in bed going, I should have said this, I should have said this. And the next time you see him, you're hit by the same spirit of intimidation. You go, Tom. They turn around and go, what? Nothing. Because you look over at the screen in your mind where you wrote everything down, and it's all gone. Your brain's been wiped clean. And so I had all these things all ready to tell my dad. It's July 4th, 1982. I get to the house. There's 30 members of the family already there. They're cooking hot dogs and hamburgers. And the Lord said, go find your daddies in the back. So I go through the house. I get out in the back deck. There's more people. And my dad is over there by himself by the garden. He loved planting gardens. He had just, all sorts of different kind of vegetables and flowers around it. And he loved it. And the Lord says, now. I go, oh, Lord. I did that. I did that. I said probably my relatives thought I was sick. And I walk over and I said, hi, Dad. He turns and goes, hi, Chris. He's telling me about the garden because that's what we had to talk about. We didn't have much to talk about. And he's telling about the garden, this and that. And I said, Dad? He goes, yeah. Can I talk to you about something? He goes, yeah, sure. And I said, it's about when I was little and you lived with us. Quiet as can be. And then suddenly I hear, not the word, because the word could be, well, what's that? But it was, what? And my heart just went, oh. And I looked over to the sheet that I had written. It was white. Oh, but nothing. Nothing. I couldn't come up with anything he'd ever done. And I'd been hurt so many times, and I couldn't come up with one thing. The Montreal thing. I couldn't, even that was, there's nothing. And I just said, Dad, I just want to tell you that I love you and I forgive you for anything that ever happened. Now, what would you want to hear at that point? It's okay, thank you. I would even like, what do you mean? But the worst thing is to hear nothing. And he stood there and didn't say a word. And we're standing there 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It's almost been a minute. And at about the minute time, the Lord says, put your hand up around him. No, that's a stupid idea. Satan, go away. And it's like, you know my voice. Put your hand around him. So I went like this. The second my hand hit his shoulder, he dropped and began to weep uncontrollably. And he's weeping like this. And I'm holding him like this. And it's just uncomfortable. And I realize there's 30 people behind us. And we're doing this. I'm not going to turn around, but I'm sure it wasn't pretty. And I'm holding him like this, and he realizes that I'm holding him up all by myself. So he takes his left hand to hold himself up on me and puts his hand on. The second his hand hits me here, I begin to weep. And we're like, ah! We're just weeping like this. And we wept for a good 2 to 3 minutes. And it wasn't one of these, when my mom would cry, she'd take a tissue and this little tiny corner triangle, the tissue, she'd wipe. I couldn't figure it out. She could use that tissue for like 5 years. The two of us are crying, and every crevice is all this liquid's coming out. It's just like, it's like one of these things out of, anyway. So and I realized at the end of our crying, we're a mess. We can't turn around. And so I said to my dad, Dad, he goes, what? And I reached my hand up and I went, nice carrots. And when I said the word carrots, this little thing flew off. And he starts laughing. He goes, yeah, did you see my tomatoes? And we start pointing as an excuse to get rid of the snot that's all around us. We get all done, and we were hugging, and it was like this hug had gone on, and we stopped hugging. No one ever said a word. To this day, no one's ever said a word about that moment. I had 20, 30 people behind us. They had to have seen it. No one said a word. And it comes time when I go to say goodbye, I don't think about shaking his hand. I'm now back to how I say hi and goodbye to people. And I just go up and I give him a hug. And he goes, whoa. I said, oh, sorry, Dad. He goes, no. I like that. I like that. Give me that again. Come here. So I walk up and he goes, oh, yeah, that's good. Let's do that again. Now, my question, what is the session that starts at 2 o'clock? What's that called? Soaking time. Okay, Jonathan, I'm going to push 10 minutes into soaking time to finish this story so that they don't miss lunch. No? Okay, real fast. Every time we meet and greet each other, next time I go to my dad's house, the door opens like a movie. And he's standing there. Hey. So I just walk into his arms and he gives me a hug. I'm going, oh, I'm in my dad's arms. This is so cool. And every time we say goodbye, he gives me a hug. And this goes on for a couple of years. And suddenly I'm asked and called away to a Catholic charismatic community to do like a 3 or 4 week summer thing to worship and to speak to this group of Catholics who's now, they've been filled with the Spirit and they're looking for direction. And what do we do with worship? And who is God now? Because is he different? Do we have to lose their faith? And it's just a sweet time. But I get there and a guy named Brian comes up. Hi, my name is Brian. He leans up and kisses me. I went, huh? He goes, oh, I'm sorry. We kiss around here. I said, yeah, I see that. He goes, well, Romans 16:16, greet one another with a holy kiss. The holy kiss means that all that I have is yours. My house is your house. You are most welcome. I said, I like that. I like that. I don't like you kissing me, but I like the fact that everything that you have is mine. So we made a little joke and da-da-da. Well, at the end of the night, he gives me a kiss goodnight, and somebody else gives me a kiss goodnight, and then I get a kiss in the morning at breakfast when people, and some brushed their teeth and some didn't, and yet everyone's kissing, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a long 3-4 weeks. By the end of day 3, I'm kissing everything. Trees, dogs, it didn't matter. Hi, it's like, yeah, okay, and do you want any stamps with that? And, yeah, I'm kissing everybody. And so I get home, and I leave Sunday morning after the service is over. I leave, it's Albany, New York. It's about a 4-hour drive to my dad's house. So I leave at about 1 o'clock. I get to my dad's for dinner on that Sunday night. And I have been kissing like a bandit now for 3 weeks. The door opens up, my dad's right there. And I walk into his arms and I give him a kiss on the cheek. He goes, whoa! I said, Dad, I've been away to Catholic charismatic community. Everybody kisses. I am sorry. He goes, no, I like that. Give me another one right there. So I come close like this. He goes, here, give me your cheek. He kisses my cheek. He goes, let's do this every time. I said, okay. So at the end of the night, I'm going to say goodbye to my dad. He goes, oh, the kissing thing. Come here. He goes, come on. So I give him a kiss. And so every time we kiss each other. So now we're greeting each other with hugs and kisses. Then I drive him to his house. Now I've got 3 kids. I'm married with 3 kids. And this has been going on now for a number of years. And I get to the house, and I see the drape pulled up. And the second my house is, I pull up in front of the house, the drape goes down. By the time I've pulled in the driveway, the second I turn the car off, my car door opens up. He pulls me out and holds me and starts kissing my cheek. And my wife starts to get out. He goes, Laura, stop. I want to come help. And so he goes around the car and takes her and helps her out, kisses her face all up and says, okay, give me those kids one at a time. Well, during that time, I walk into the house. He's now been remarried for years, doing great, and the gal's name is Marion. And I said, Marion, what? And she goes, oh, thank God you're here. I said, what? She says, your father's been standing by the window for the last 45 minutes. When's Chris coming? When's Chris coming? I said, Dave, what are you doing? He goes, I just can't wait to kiss my son. And that's what it was like. It's just the redeemed power of God. He comes back with this x-ray and shows me an x-ray that doesn't look good. And the Lord says, go to the hospital every time he goes, even to the doctor. So I go with him to the doctor. And they diagnose nothing because everything here is gray. I'd worked in an OR for 5 years during that time. I was a surgical assistant, wanted to be a surgical PA, and decided to be a pastor instead, which is kind of the same thing. and so I knew X-rays, and I looked at this, and I just didn't know what that is. They did try twice. They used these trocars to try and get some tissue from his lungs. Couldn't get it, so they're going to put him under general anesthesia. I'm at the hospital. I wheel him down because they all know me. We get down to the holding room, and his head is here, and the nurse is here, and all 4 doctors, the attending surgeon, the anesthesiologist, resident, and third-year medical student, holding room nurse is here, and she says to Marion, his wife, and myself, say goodbye to your dad. And so Marion reaches over to the front and says goodbye, and because there's no barriers there. The side rails are up, and so she reaches around to the head. Well, I'm standing, Marion's here, and I can't kind of reach around there, so I'm just going to reach over the handrail. The handrail is just a stainless steel thing that sits like this. So I am going to reach over the handrail, and I'm going to give him a hand, like a guy handshake. So I was going to give a manly man shake. So I go like this, love you, Dad. I even said it like a manly man. I remember saying, love you, Dad, because I got all these doctors here. So I didn't, and Dad holds my hand, and he looks at me and goes, we don't do this. And I'm thinking, I know what we do. He pulls me over the handrail, which is now cutting into my ribs. And I'm reaching over like this, and I'm dangling now on this thing, and they're laughing. And he takes my face, and he kisses me on the cheeks, just like Jesus kissed me. And he turns my head to the doctor. And if I had not been there and heard this, I would have thought, you're telling me a movie? He turns my head to the doctor and goes, this is my son. I love him. He's great. And I'm just like, oh, Jesus, take me right now. Well, no, then my wife and kids, it would be a bummer for them. Okay, never mind. But just let me enjoy this. And I'm just like, oh, this is so good. And I start to come down off the rail, and my dad pulls me back. And the doctors have started. He goes, I'm not done. And they turn around. And Dad goes, I want one more kiss. But now he's holding me like this. He's holding my cheeks. He can't kiss me anywhere but my forehead, my nose, or my lips. And I know it's not going to be the first two. And he's just holding me and goes, I love you. Okay. But you know what? I didn't think twice about it. I didn't think once about it, but I didn't think twice about it. I said to the Lord, it's so awesome. And so they turn him and they start to wheel him away. And if I stand here, the elevator was about where that door is. And so they get him about to this far away from me, about 10 or 12 feet away. And my dad yells out, stop! Well, the doctors are almost to the door, and they stop. They turn around again. And I look at their faces, they're going, what? And suddenly he goes, I can't see my son. Would you turn my stretcher and pull me backwards? So the nurse goes, sure. Turns the stretcher and begins to pull him like this. And now he didn't say, I can't see my wife and son. He said, I can't see my son. Now, I mentioned that to Marion later, and I said, I'm sorry, that was awkward. She says, no, it's not. He chose me. I know he loves me. He wanted to make sure that you knew that he loved you. And I'm just like, oh. So they're pulling him back like this, and my father goes, and I go, love you. He goes, no. I love you. And I rip out my heart and I throw it back to him. He goes, no. He starts shooting love bullets at me. And like the Matrix, I'm going, like this. The Matrix wasn't out yet. It was before me. And it just hit me like this, and I'm pretending. And I load up a gun. I start shooting, and he's getting blown up in this. And the nurse is laughing and crying at the same time. And the doctors haven't moved. They're watching this whole thing. And finally, he gets in the elevator, and the elevator starts to close this way. It wasn't one where it came this way. It came from one side. And my dad was in the middle, and he's in the stretcher, and he goes. And as it closes, he gets to the end, and he goes. And that's the last time I saw my dad alive. He died a few minutes later. He had an aneurysm between the heart and the lungs. And I am left with a kissing, hugging, I love my son. He's great. I was, Lord, why? And when the doctor came and told me, he said, Chris, you and I worked together. I'd worked with this guy. We'd done surgery. I never saw anything like this. He said, tell me again what you did with your father this weekend. I said, we worked in the garden. He goes, I don't know how that's possible. Everything in his chest is metastasized. His lungs, his heart, his liver, it's hard as a rock. The man shouldn't have had a heartbeat. He should have choked to death 6 months to a year ago. He goes, I don't know what kept him alive. I go, I do. And I am forever grateful for a hugging, kissing father. I see his face. I see Jesus' face here. All I have to do is want to see it, and I see it. I see him smile at me. Say, Chris, but that didn't happen to me. That didn't happen to my dad. It doesn't matter. I am not any different. Here's the thing. When you see him, you see the Father. And the Holy Spirit wants you to see him so you see the Father. It's not the, show me the Father, show me the Father. Just understand the nature of Jesus, and you will understand the nature of the Father. They're one. They really are. I just had that. I'm sorry, I'm even going over and I'm even cutting stuff out. But Father, I just thank you that it is your desire to reveal yourself into the scribes and to the Pharisees, to the religious among us, and yet to the most sinful among us. You want to show that you're the Father that runs to his Son who returns, and that you embrace and you kiss. You're a kissing Papa. And Lord, I just ask that you would impart the truth of your nature into each heart here. Everyone comes from a different background. Everyone has a different relationship with their dad. Some, their fathers are no longer alive. Some are abusive. Some are just so wonderful. And yet it doesn't matter. In some point in time, there's disappointment. But there never is when we know who you are. And Lord, you say to the church at Ephesus that you want us to be rooted and grounded, not in knowledge, but in love. And so I pray that this would be a group that is known, the people in this that have been a part of this school and that go out from here, whether it's the worship school this week, whether it's the school of ministry, that they would be known as people that are rooted and grounded in the knowledge of your affection. Lord, give us glimpses of your face, and let us see the expression of wild love that you have towards us. And because you're so unique, do it differently, but speak to all of us about who you are in Jesus' name. So I'm just going to do this. I don't know if there's a quiet CD you can throw on. It's about 12:45 or so. I'm just going to let you guys just hang and go one at a time, two at a time, however you want to do it. But my prayer before I came to this school for you was a veil would come off your face and you would see him smile at you. You would see his smile. And let me just tell you, my Papa can redeem any situation, whether you were the recipient or whether you were the cause. He can redeem it. And he can show his face and he can show what he's really like. So, Lord, do that in Jesus' name.